So good afternoon, students. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Can hear.
Good afternoon, sir. Can hear.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right.
Yes, sir.
We have around, I think, 20 odd students, but we hope others will join. But anyway, anybody can miss one or two classes, 2, 3 classes, because we are only counting 80% attendance. Right. For today lecture, I gave two PowerPoint files. One is the theory of consumer and producer behavior. You don't want to worry that much about this one because this is a very complex and heavily mathematical explanation you find there. But I remove all this mathematical explanation, and this is mainly the good for intellectual development and academic rigor and academic complexity type of things, But especially for undergraduates, we are heavily teaching this one as a most probably as a managers, your main aim is to apply the knowledge to the practical situation. Therefore, you can maybe surfacely understand what is this, the theory of consumer and the producer behavior. And in addition to that, I gave another PPT file regarding the small and medium scale enterprises. That also very important topic. And I gave one case study also, that is, I think, Harvard case study, that is more or less the case study on the 5 stages of small business growth. That also you have to summarize case study with 500 words as usual goes. That is second part of the lecture. First part of the lecture, we will cover more or less the theory of consumer and producer behavior. Then you remember in the demand supply equilibrium analysis, we were thoroughly dealing with what we call the main factors behind the demand curve, as well as the main factors behind the supply curve. That is the thing which we are going to throw here. Why the supply curve is going upward, why the demand curve is going downward. So what is the economic interpretation for that? Therefore, it is, you can maybe surfacely understand what is it. I think you can see the basic behind the consumer behavior, the theory of consumer choice, build a model to analyze consumers' behavior under the demand curve, or what we call the decision-making procedure of consumer in demand in a particular good or service under the limited income. If the consumer has a limited income, then he is constrained with the incomes, then how he is going to play in the market. The economics are trying to model it. Then you can see the theory of consumer behavior is the description of how consumers allocate the limited income among the different goods and services to maximize their well-being. That is the way we do, nowadays you can see in a country like Sri Lanka, the inflation is rocketing, because due to this, the floating of the dollar, the local currency issue, then because it doesn't link with the interest rate, the right way. Therefore, the prices of goods and services are going up like a rocketing, then the people has to more or less very carefully they have to spend their income, because they have to maximize on the one hand their well-being, as well as on the other hand their income becoming more limited, but market also not saturated goods with, then you can say this is maybe the right way to economize during this time. Then the third line, you can see the consumer behavior is best understood in the 3 distinct steps: the consumer preferences, other one the budget constraint, and the consumer choices. Then you can see this is more or less we are trying to read the consumer's mindset up, as well as we are going to touch to their pocket also. How much money available in your pocket, and what is your preferences, and how you are, whenever you go to market, how do you behave? What are your main choices? Then it's more or less we say the more or less the consumer's mind reading, the psychology type of things. Then you can see the some basic assumption about the preferences. Then there are 3 assumptions. You can see first one is a completeness, second one is a transitivity, third one is a more is better than less. That is a human behavior. Then completeness means the preferences are assumed to be complete. In other words, the consumers can compare and rank all possible baskets, goods basket which you buy. Whenever you go to supermarket, you don't buy only one thing. You go with the cards and you get a basket. Many things you buy. Thus, for any two market basket A and B, a consumer will prefer A to B, will prefer B to A, or will be indifferent between the two. By different, by indifferent, we mean that a person will be equally satisfied with either baskets. The note that these preferences ignore cost. The consumer might prefer stick to hamburger, but buy hamburger because it is cheaper. Then you can see first one is a basic assumption of preference, a completeness. And the transitivity is another assumption. That means the preferences are transitive. Transitivity means if a consumer prefer basket A to basket B and basket B to basket C, then the consumer also prefer A to C. The transit is normally regarded as a necessity for consumer consistency. That means it's a human psychology. We are trying to read the human's mind. Whenever you go to market, how do you behave? How your mind setup is working. And the third assumption is more is better than less. The goods are assumed to be desirable. That means to be a good, consequently consumers always prefer more of any goods to less. In addition, consumers are never satisfied. More is always better, even if just a little better. This assumption is made for pedagogic reasons, namely it simplifies the graphical analysis. Of course, some goods such as air pollution may be undesirable and consumers will also always prefer less. This is here we are trying to understand human behavior. We like to have a more rather to less. That is a human behavior. But in some goods like air pollution, maybe crime type of things, we don't want more. We want to lesser, that type of things. Then you can see three approaches for consumer behavior. How you are going to explain the demand curve? Whenever prices are high, we are demanding less. Prices are low, we are demanding more. Then what is the explanation? There are so many explanations available in your syllabus. We have the only two. There is a Marshall's cardinal utility approach, what we call the marginal utility concepts. Another one's the Hicks ordinal utility approach. That means indifference curve concepts. In addition to that, we have a revealed preference approach. That is not in your syllabus, but anyway, you got to know what is it. Then we are thoroughly dealing with the Marshall's cardinal utility approach or marginal utility concepts and the Hicks ordinal utility approach or indifference curve concepts. Then we'll start with the Marshall's cardinal utility approach. Then you can say that this explains the demand behavior of a rational consumer, because we are always talking about rational consumers. They don't have any other things except the profit or money motives. Then of a rational consumer in terms of the normal demand curve. This curve slopes downwards to the right with the negative relationships between the price and the quantity demanded. Then you remember in second lecture, we were discussing that one. It measures the price effect, how consumer adjusts his demand to the price changes. That means more quantity is purchased as the price falls and the less quantity is purchased as the price increases. This consumer behavior is explained according to the diminishing marginal utility concepts. You remember in third lecture, we were discussing the diminishing marginal return theory with respect to the production functions. The same like here, the diminishing marginal utility concepts. Then you can see the basic assumption of the Marshall's, this utility approach. The first one is a cardinal utility. That means utility is a measurable. Once you consume something, you get some satisfaction. That satisfaction we say we can measure out of the utility. Then independent utility exists for various bundle of each commodity, and the total utility is an additive concept. The constant marginal utility of money at all level of income of the consumer. Marginal utility is a diminishing concept with the various degrees. The rationality, that is the consumer's main objective, is to maximization of the utility. And the introspective analysis, here the economist uses his sharp common sense and psychological readings of the man's economic behavior. Then you can see it's mainly the economic psychology, we can say. Then another one, the law of marginal diminishing utility. Then you can say utility is the level of satisfaction derived from the consumption of the good or service. Once we consume a good or service, we get some satisfaction. Then economists feel we can measure it. The unit we are using, the utensils. Then you can see the marginal utility is the additional utility obtained from the additional unit of a commodity purchase. The law of demand is based on the law of diminishing marginal utility. That's important. Then you can say the law of demand is based on the law of diminishing marginal utility. If we consume more from the same goods, then what is going to happen? The first unit, you are getting the more utility. Second unit, not the same, The third unit, not the same, It is up, but it is going with the diminishing rates. Therefore, if a consumers want to buy more, you have to reduce the price. That is the argument. then you can see consumer satisfaction is maximized when the marginal utility equalizes its price ratio. That means marginality of goods X or marginality of goods Y equalize its price ratio PXO PY. Then you can see MUX should equal to the PXO, MUY should equal to the PY. By using simple mathematics and graphical presentation, you can prove that one. Then you can see the law of diminishing marginal utility implies that while increasing the stock of commodity, its marginal utility is diminished. Hence, the consumer would buy more when the price falls. Therefore, naturally, price should go down. Otherwise, people don't buy more. Then, therefore, the demand curve is based on the downward sloping marginal utility curve. That is why the demand curve is behaving that way. Then you can see marginal utility curve and the demand curve. Then you can see the both curves are there. Here the demand curve, here the marginal utility curve. The consumer gains marginal utility of MU1. Then you can see MU1 from consuming the X1 unit. Then the P1 reflect the price of the consumers willing to pay for that unit. Then you can see this is the price they like to pay for this unit. In consuming X2 unit, then you can see X2 unit, marginality falls to the, then you can see because you are drinking the second tea, you don't get the same satisfaction you got from the first tea, While you are drinking the third tea, you don't get the same from the second one, fourth, fifth, sixth, Maybe if you want to drink the 10th tea, then actually the producer has to pay something to you. Otherwise, you don't want to buy it, That is the argument. You have to drop the price. Then you can see price must therefore fall to P to persuade the consumers to buy that additional unit. Therefore, the concept of diminishing marginal utility explain the downward slope of a demand curve, because you don't get the same satisfaction from if you are increasing the more unit from the same goods. Therefore, if you want to buy more, then the producer has to or seller has to reduce the price. Then you'll go for that. That was a basic idea behind. Then based on that one, the Marshalls developed so many mathematical formulas, graphs, and so many theories. Then you can see the law of marginal utility, the consumer equilibrium condition here, the marginal utility of a good X divided, or maybe you can say the PX over MUX must be equal to the PY over MUY. Then here the MU means marginal utility of the good X, P means the price of the X or Y goods. So while purchasing the various commodities, the ratio of marginal utilities and the prices are equalized by the consumer. This is the thing what you do in the market. If the prices of the good X falls, then this equilibrium condition will change. And in order to attain the equilibriums, again, the consumer has to reduce his marginal utility of X and increase marginal utility of Y till the both ratios are equalized. This is the thing what the consumers are doing at the market, Economists, we look at and we observe and we build the models, whether we like or whether you like or not, this is the way you behave. Economists are building model based on your behavior at the market. Then this type of consumer behavior with price changes named as a substitution and income effect by the Marshall. Then you can see why the demand curve is sloping downward, because due to the substitution and the income effect of price changes. Then what do you mean by substitution effect? Generally, can say the consumer substitute goods due to the price changes. When a price of the good falls, the consumer is induced to substitute more of the relatively cheaper commodity, because when the price of the commodity falls, the consumer's marginal utility for that good becomes comparatively high. Hence, to increase total satisfaction, he finds it worthwhile to purchase more of the cheaper goods. This effect is always positive. You have other one, what we call the income effect. This is the change of the real income due to the price changes. If price falls, real income increases. If price increases, real income decreases. The income effect is positive for goods with a higher marginal utility. Income effect is negative for inferior goods. Income effect is zero for independent goods. So entire surplus income gain due to the fall of price is spending on some other goods. You remember these things we discussed in your second lecture. And the limitations of the Marshall's approach, because people are saying that, utility cannot be measured in any units. Once you consume something, you get a satisfaction. You can't measure it. Science is not developed to measure that. The additive utility also very wrong concepts. Homogeneous nature of the utility is unrealistic. The cross effect of substitute and the complementaries are not given any attentions while measuring the utility. Constant marginal utility of money assumption is unpractical. Utility approach may not be applicable to individual and bulky goods. Incomplete analysis on price effect, inadequate explanation for given goods, no empirical test, and the scope is limited. There are a lot of criticisms and limitations regarding the Marshall's approach, but this approach over 100 years work within the economics. And because of that, there's another approach came, what we call the indifference curve approach. Then you can see idea originated from Edgeworth, 1881. Then you can see very old theories, these things. They developed by Pareto in 1906, applied to consumer behavior by Hicks and Allen in 1939. The main idea of this indifference curve approach, ordinal measurements of utility, and it is based on the scale of preference. Ordinal measurement means comparison and ranking rather quantifications. And the scale of preference, that means conceptual arrangement of various goods and services combinations according to the level of significance, right? Therefore, two words is a very important: ordinal measurements and the scale of preferences of a consumer. Then the Hicks shows that people are interested in number of commodities and their various combinations are the single commodities. These various combination can be compared, and rational consumer prefer to higher combination always. Then you can see the features of this scale of preference. This also more into the human psychology, whenever you go to market, the economists are trying to model how do you behave that one. Then you can see the features of a scale of preferences. It is always driven by a consumer in his mind, consciously or unconsciously. It is based on the subjective valuation of the goods made by the consumer on the basis of liking, habits, taste, desires, intensity of bonds, and such other psychological factors. This is more or less a human psychology. It is drawn independent of the prices of the goods and the consumer's income. It represents ordinal comparison of the level of satisfaction derived by the consumer from different combinations of the goods. This differ person to person. This consider the significance of commodities in the context of their stock. And you can see that we are using mainly indifference schedule, indifference curves, and indifference maps, we call it in this analysis. An indifference schedule is a list of alternative combination in the stock of goods which yield equal satisfactions to the consumer. Indifference curve means an indifference curve is the locus of points representing all the different combination of the two goods which yield equal utility or satisfaction. Indifference maps means group or set of indifference curve. Indifference curves have special features. Then you can see assumption on the indifference curves. The consumer is interested in buying two goods in combination, because in graphically we can't show more than two. Then we can say all the goods which we consume, we can put into the broad two categories, luxury good or essential goods. And the consumer is interested in buying two goods in the combination, able to rank preferences and give a complete ordering of the scale of preferences. So it's actually human psychology, The consumer wish to more rather to less. He is rational and his choices are transitive. And the ordinal measurement of utility, perfect divisibility of goods under consideration. That means the continuity of this one. We use the integral for that. And the features of the indifference curve, you can see downward from left to right. That means they are negatively sloped. The convex to origin, that means deep to y and flat to x, and need not to be parallel and do not intersect each other. And higher indifference curves are giving the high values for that one. The human's behavior is that they want to go to highest indifference curve by look at their budget constraint, whatever money available, look at they want to go for a highest indifference curve. Then indifference curve approach, you have what we call the slope of the curve, we call the marginal rate of substitutions. This is the core of the indifference curve analysis. We want to get that one. Thereafter, we want to get the price ratio also. And it says that the rate of substitution of one commodity for the other along an indifference curve, or the marginal rate of substitution of x for y, refers to the amount of y that must be given up for unit of x gain by the consumer to keep the level of satisfaction unchanged. That means marginal rate of substitution should equal to MUY over MUX. That means marginal utility of the goods x or the marginal utility of the goods y. Then the indifference curve approach can be used to explain many things, not only this consumer behavior, but also characteristic approach for consumer demand, the combining brands and individual supply of labor, etc. In marketing, we are heavily using this indifference curve approach. Your marketing lecturer is going to explain indifference curve approach. We are using to very many things. On the other hand, now we have some idea about the indifference curve. Now we have to see the budget constraint. Then consumers' income and the price of the goods determine the consumer's budget line. Budget constraint describe the different bundle that the consumers can afford. This shows the maximum affordable quantity of one good given the quantity of the other goods being purchased. Then you can see the affordable consumption basket. You can say the university students, the weekly income 50 rupees. Then 50 rupees he has to spend between the films and the meals. Then if you put all the 50 to the maybe 5 films, he doesn't have anything for a meals, Other way around, if you eat the 10 meals, then he doesn't have anything to see the films, to watch the films. Then that way you can see trade-off table, we call this one. Then while they are going here to here, you can say the more quantity of the meals are going up and the films are going down. Other way around also you can see we call the trade-off because the income is limited. Then based on that one, we can prepare a budget line. Then you can see in budget line, you have different combinations. If you get a point, then you only watch the film, no foods, but F points, only foods, no films. And then while they are going here, then you can see you are sacrificing film and getting more foods. You are going up, we are sacrificing more meals and getting more film watching. Then that way, then this is a further explanation of that one, various points. And the slope of the budget line indicates how many meals must be sacrificed to get the another films. Moving from point F to point T, then you can see it's reducing, going up, it is increasing. Then the slope of the curves are the matters. Then what we call the budget line. Budget line shows the maximum combination of the goods that the consumer can afford given income and the prevailing prices. Point on the budget line use up the entire consumer budgets. Point above the budget lines are unaffordable. Point inside the budget line would allow additional spending. That means you are not spending all the money. Then that way, then you can see point on the budget line, use up the entire consumer budget. Point above the budget line, unaffordable. Point inside the budget line, allow additional spending, some income unspent. End point says the situation with the one good spending only for one goods. Then you can see indifference curve approach we can use now to explain the consumer behavior. Then this model explain buyers' behavior according to their taste and the preferences, and what actually market allow them to do according to their incomes and the prices. Now we can combine both now, So on the one hand, we have consumer preferences with the indifference curve, we are getting preference. And on the other hand, we have now budget line, it depends on your income and the prices of the market. The main advantage of this theory, analysis of the consumer's behavior according to changes in the market and interpretation of the elasticities for the market. We can combine elasticities also here, not like the marginal utility theory. Then the 4 elements of this model: the consumer's income, the price of the goods, the consumer's taste, which rank different, bundle of the good by the satisfaction they yield, the behavioral assumption that consumers do the best they can for themselves. From the affordable consumption bundles, the consumer pick the bundle that maximize his own satisfaction. Then we can easily find where you find your equilibriums. The regarding taste, the taste also important because it's a human psychology. We are trying to analyze the consumer's taste. We have a 3 assumption based on the taste. The consumer can rank alternative bundle of goods according to the satisfaction or utility they provide. The consumer prefer more to less. That means the marginal rate of substitution of meals for films is the quantity of films the consumer must sacrifice to increase the quantity of meals by 1 unit without changing the total utility. Therefore, total utility concept is also very important there. Diminishing marginal rate of substitutions. Then another assumption based on the taste, the consumer taste exhibits a diminishing marginal rate of substitution when to hold utility constant. The diminishing quantities of one good must be sacrificed to obtain successive equal increases in the quantity of other goods. Then more or less you can say it's a reflection of the marginal utility theory actually. The diminishing marginal rate of substitution, then you can see the rate at which one good is substituted for another as they move along the indifference curve. When moving down the indifference curve, the consumer is only willing to sacrifice fewer and fewer unit of the one goods to gain additional unit of other goods to maintain the same level of satisfactions. Then you can see the representing taste as an indifference curve, and the indifference curve shows all the consumption bundles which yield the same utility. If you get the U1, they are the same utility you find there. Then you have a U2 and the U3, the same, they are not crossing each other. Then you can see the shape of these curves. Then we can show the taste of any consumer by indifference curve. Then you can see the above figures show 2D indifference maps for 2 consumers, but same goods, but different taste. Then you can see consumer A will give up more X to obtain lesser Y. That means the consumer A like prefer more to Y goods. Consumer B will give up less X to obtain the more Y. That means the consumer B prefer to the good X more. Then you can see shape of the indifference curve is a little different. Then the utility maximization and the choice. Then you can see budget line shows affordable bundle given the consumer's market environment. The indifference map shows the taste. Then you can see you have budget line, there you have indifference maps. Now we can both put together and we can find where the consumer is finding the equilibriums. Then you can see here we assume the consumer chooses the affordable bundle that maximize his or her utility. Generally, consumers select a point on the budget line, but in order to know the utility maximizing point in the budget line, we have to know the consumer taste. Therefore, we have to use the indifference curve for that. The consumer equilibrium is achieved where the budget line is tangential to the highest indifference curve. The consumption pattern then optimal and the satisfaction is maximized. Then you can see this is the way whenever you go to shop the supermarket, you go with a cart and you have a credit card with you, you know. And after you buy 10 goods, you will stop it. You know why you are stopping? Because this is the way it works. You know, economies are modeled. You know, your budget line is okay and your the preference is okay. You find equilibrium C, then you stop buying and you coming back again home. Then you can see the point C, MRS, marginal rate of substitution equal to price ratios of the two goods. And then you can see at that C point, the marginality of X, you know, and the marginality Y equal to price ratios. Then you can see the point C is the one which the consumers can achieve, you know, highest utility curve, you know, highest indifference curve, and budget line allowed to go. Then this is the point, but these point also in equilibrium, but they are not the what we call the best equilibrium situation. This is the best equilibrium because they are at a very lower indifference curve. This is the highest indifference curve. This is the way you are finding stopping buying at the market because you become equilibrium, you know, you became saturated, and then you can see the indifference curve and the budget line touch their slopes, then the slopes are equal. Then what we call the condition MR is marginal rate of substitution equal to the price ratios. Then you stop your buying, you became what we call the saturated in the market, or you find your equilibriums in the market. Then thereafter you can see the relative price index, the effect of the taste on the consumer choice. Then you can see the MR is equal PX over PY. Then you can see this consumer find here, this consumer find in different places, you know, because they have different rate, different taste for goods, various type of goods in the market. And adjustment to the income changes, then economists can say a lot regarding this one. This is the initial situation we call expansion path. And you're going the increase in income situation and the decrease in income situations. You are going to up and down in the adjustment. And the price changes and the budget line also, you can see rotation of the budget lines. And these situations, the change X only Y is stable. And here other way around, the rotation of the budget line and the change in money income, shift in budget line. Then economists can do a lot of what we call the constant, or maybe the various dynamic analysis. Then thereafter you can see the substitution and income effect. Thereafter we can link with the elasticity this approach. The consumer choice is based on the interaction of the affordable opportunities represented by budget line and taste represented by the indifference curve. Generally, the effect of price increase divided into two, income effect, likewise the marginal utility theory. That means the reduction in the purchasing power of a given money income, and another one, the substitution effect, the change in the relative price of the two goods. Further, we can say that substitution effect of a price change is the adjustment of demand to the relative price change alone, and the income effect of a price change is the adjustment of demand to the change in the real income alone. Then you can see we can decompose this one, the substitution and income effect, through this one. Then you can see the higher meal prices rotate the budget line from AF to AF prime. Then you can see AF to AF prime, and the consumer move from point C to the point T. Then you can see consumer point C to the point T. We can decompose it. First they go to the C to D, thereafter D to E they go. Then you can see this move can be decomposed into the pure substitution effect. That means C to D is a pure substitution effect, and the response to the relative price change as the old standard of the living plus a pure income effect from D to E. Then you can see we can decompose that one to the pure substitution effect and the pure income effect to the fall in the real income at the constant relative prices. Then thereafter we can apply to various type of goods. What is a substitution good, inferior goods, given goods, and that way. That analysis is more mathematicals. And thereafter we can link that one with the cross price elasticity of demand also. In the second lecture, you will remember we were discussing that one little. Then income effect is more than the substitution effects when it comes to the cross price elasticity of demand. And the positive cross price elasticity situation, substitution effect is more than the income effect. And thereafter we can see the various type of goods link in that one. You don't want to worry about that. And the market demand curve, individual demand curve slope, and the market demand curve also summation of the individual. That is why behave in that one. And then you can see that the first approach is a marginal utility approach. Second one is a indifference curve approach. We are trying to explain why the demand curve is sloping downward, because mainly due to the income and the substitution effect of price changes. That is mathematically we can prove that way. And we have another one, the theory of revealed preferences. The theory of revealed preferences shows how the choices that individuals make when prices and income vary can be used to determine their preferences. When an individual chooses basket A, even though he or she could not afford B, we know that A is preferred to B. This can be well explained with the indifference curve approach. You don't want to worry that way. There are 1,000 theories explained to explain why the demand curve is sloping downward. And the same way we can say the producer behavior also. How the producers are behaving in the market whenever they want to produce something, they look at the factor price, what is the labor price, what is the interest rate, capital price, If a labor is cheap, they go for a more labor intensive, capital is cheap, they go for a capital intensive methods. Then you can see here we are using ISO content, ISO cost approach. Then you can see ISO content, the choice of production techniques. Using indifference curve and budget line, we came to conclusions that the consumer will achieve his or her equilibrium at the point. You can see the MRS equal to PX, PY over PX, the point C, that means price ratio we are equalized into the marginal rate of substitutions. That means slope of the indifference curve. The same approach we can use to show the selection of production techniques by producers. But here we use the isocon curve and the relative price line, isocost curve. That's the way producers are. Then you can see an isocon. The isocon shows the different minimum combination of inputs to produce a given level of output. Different point on the isocon reflect different production techniques. If you see on the one hand labor, on the other hand capital. Then if you go to this side, the labor side is a more labor intensive techniques. If you go to other way, the capital side, then you will see it's a capital intensive. Then you can see the different production techniques for making the same output level. ISO means the same output. Curve is representing maybe 100 units. There are very many ways to produce the 100 units with a different combination. Then you can see the features of the isocon curves. They are not intersecting or crossing. Different isocons are referred to the different output level. Each isocon slope down for each output level. More in one factor means less in other factor. Each isocon getting flatter, move along the right, moving down in the curve. It takes more and more extra capital input to make equal successive reduction in the labor input required to produce a given output. That means it's a production selection of the production techniques. And the cost minimizing input level. This is the idea of what producers are doing. The cost minimizing minimizing the input level. Each isocon such as I shows the particular output level. Then you can see this 100, 200, 300, 400 unit of production. High isocon such as I double prime shows the high output level. Straight line such as L naught, K naught R. Then you can see these are the ISO cost curves. The total cost are shown by the ISO cost lines. The slope of an ISO cost line depend only on relative factor prices. Then higher ISO costs such as L1, K1 implies higher or the larger total cost. Then you can see point A or B. Then the MPL, that means MPK or MPL, marginal product of labor. Then the marginal product of capital should be equal to the price ratio of the factors of production. Then you can see this ratio we called it the MRTs. MRTs means marginal rate of technical substitution should equate to the price ratio of the two inputs. Then we can say that broadly, whenever you want to produce, you need so many raw materials inputs, but we can put one as a labor, other as a capital. That was idea in most of the analysis, because we can't explain very many things with a single graph. Then we can see marginal rate of technical substitution should equate to the price ratio of these inputs. Then that is the place where the the producer find the equilibriums. This is a cost minimizing input level, whether you like or not. This is the way producers are doing it. They look at the wage price in the market, and they look at the capital price or interest. If interest is cheaper, they go for a capital intensive production techniques. The labor is cheaper, then they go for labor intensive. This is the way the producers are behaving in the market. This also we can decompose to into various things. Then sometimes we can say that I don't want to go into details. Then we can see here the pure substitution effect and the pure output effect. Then B to C, first they go to the B prime to the B, and thereafter they go to the C. And that way you can see the pure substitution effect and the pure output effect. This is the way the producers are finding equilibriums in the market. Earlier, the consumers are finding. Based on that one, we can say why the supply curve is going upward. Then you can see this is the economic explanation for that one. Then the characteristic approach for consumer demand. In your textbooks, you have so many examples. Commodities possess a special characteristic or attributes. The competing products may possess similar or different characteristic. Then the consumer demand goods because of their special characteristic. And therefore, in addition to price and income characteristic, brands also play a very important role in determination of the utility. Your marketing lecturer are going to explain more about this characteristic approach to the consumer demands by using the indifference curve. How do you take the right marketing decisions? Right. I think this is what we call the consumer and producer behavior in the market. I think you may have some idea about why there are so many theories available. Each and every week, the new theories coming out of the what we call the high impact journals. But you don't want to worry about. This is a more or less established two theories: marginal utility theory as well as the Higgs indifference curve approach. These two are enough for you to explain consumer behavior. By using other one, you can explain what we call the isocost and isocont analysis. You can explain the producer's behavior, how they find the least the input combinations in the market. That is economic interpretations. I just said in a very layman language. It's a heavily mathematical approach. If anybody want to read more, I can give more extra readings. And now we can go to the other part of our lecture. Sorry. Can you see the screen? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think now you have a little idea about the consumer behavior and the producer behavior. If anybody want to go into deeper, because I think some of you maybe learn that's on an undergraduate level, you're using heavily mathematics, but as a manager, you don't want to worry about that one. Then you can see that is economic interpretations for why the demand curve is sloping downward, why the supply curve is going upward, consumer behavior. There are plenty of theories available in the books like Advanced Microeconomics. If you read the books, then you will see further the very heavy mathematical treatments. Sometimes you may don't understand it, but if read like an economic journal or American Economic Review type of journal, then you will see there are plenty of articles coming out of regarding the consumer behavior. Then that's okay. And now we go to the other important topic is a small and medium scale enterprises development. Then the objectives of this lecture mainly to can everybody see that slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. First one, the importance of the small and medium scale enterprise. Everybody knows if there's no small and medium scale enterprises, our economy will collapse because they are the main job creators, resource users, the main export income, and tax payments, and domestic resource usage, and they have so many contributions. If you do get any sector in the economy, in Sri Lankan economy, you can take any sector, mainly dominated by the small and medium scale enterprise, even cottage industries, rural industries, compared with the large ones. They scattered throughout the whole country, and they give a job to the local, the village girls and boys, those who do not speak foreigners language, and use the domestic resources. Silently, they are the guys who work as the lifeline of economy. Therefore, importance of the SMEs, no arguments. And the definitions for SMEs, there are plenty of definitions available, the definitions based on the maybe number of employment, how many people are employed, 50 or 10 or more than 50 or between 50, 100 or whatever, the various countries, various organizations. Sri Lanka also you find over 50 definitions, Census and Statistics have one, Central Bank has another, ministries have another one, World Bank uses another one, there's no hard and fast definitions. It depends on your study objectives. Whenever you are doing your MBA research projects, if you want to do because I know the most of the time, more than 10-20% of the class is doing something related to the small and medium scale enterprises, then you can have your own definitions, how you are going to define small, how you are going to define medium, what is the difference, and, maybe number of employment made, maybe capital employed, is a gross value, or maybe net value, maybe turnover, or maybe domestic resource usage, or maybe location, there are plenty of definitions available for that one. Indicators you can use to define the SMEs. And the policies and the incentives for small and medium scale enterprise development in Sri Lanka, you can see from independence up to now, we are promoting the small and medium scale enterprises, Sometimes if you see your half of the cabinet is related with SMEs, their duties, their idea is to help to the SMEs, But I don't know how it is working from independence up to now. We were more or less have so many policies. Each and every budget we are especially targeting the SME sector, and we are giving various incentives, concessions, training programs, loans, and advisors, what we call the MDP, management development programs, and business development programs, and a lot of consultants available regarding. But even though SMEs are not up to their full potentials, once you are doing some research on the SMEs areas, you will understand, SMEs are scattered everywhere, they were active in A to Z, each and every industry sector, yeah, different type of product, different scales, different management style, different marketing styles, and and that way, therefore, from independence up to now, Sri Lanka is promoting SMEs, and especially apex bodies of SMEs. Then if you see the University of Morocco, one of our mandate is to help to develop SMEs in Sri Lanka and solve their technology related problems, but we can see how far we are doing that, if you ask from the SMEs technical issues, Morocco University may be not that much help for them, we like to help for a large scale organization. We are very comfortable helping the dialogue go, also more maybe, big guys, because they know that we are comfortable with them, because they can give us a funds, they can give us a grant, scholarships, they can sponsor, they can give job to our students. Our students like to work in a large scale companies, job security, recognition, and good career progress and things like, then you can see we created so many apex bodies. Sometimes we produce what we call the Ministry of Industries and Development, Industrial Development Board, IDB, we have a SME bank, and and sometimes maybe normal banking system, we have a special schemes to help to the SME setup, special loan schemes, special incentives through the trade and chambers, like Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, or maybe Southern, or maybe Rajarata Chamber of Commerce, Jaffna Chamber of Commerce, they get together, and they are trying to, there's a lobby, they are trying to help, and then you can see that sometimes government sponsors apex bodies available. Maybe if you get a central bank also, they have a special section, special division to help to the SMEs, and that way, then there are, after independence up to now, each and every budget we are creating so many apex bodies to develop SMEs in Sri Lanka. But if you ask from the SMEs, they don't trust the government. They say government is big corruptive. They don't pay attention to us. They are always helping to the big companies, not for a small guys, Whenever small guys are developing, they come and tax us, they impose us labor laws and things like, and EPF, ETF we have to pay, and our flexibility, our culture is hiring, firing quickly, and no lifetime jobs with us and things like, then there are SMEs, and the government has so much problems, they don't like to get more into regulate their business, they don't want to go to the share market, they like to keep within the family members and things like, then you can see we create so many apex bodies to develop, put SMEs to next level, but in Sri Lanka it's failure, if you are SME researchers, you will understand that half of the cabinet ministers, more or less are promoting SME development, even though SMEs, they don't trust the government, they have maybe special loan schemes to develop SMEs, but SME go to banks, then the banks is asking very tough collateral, securities, fill in forms. Most of these forms are in English and things like, they don't know how to prepare a business plan. They don't get the right advice. And, there are some SMEs, the encountering all these problems, and they are developing, and they are reaching to even to larger scales. You read the case study which I gave, Harvard case study. They also mainly talk about the 5 stage of small business growth. Then based on that one, they develop a few theories. That is a very interesting. If you read that one, you will see in Sri Lankan case also same. We can put our SMEs also these 5 stage. Most of our SMEs, maybe first stage, they will disappear. But even though there are plenty of policies, incentives, apex bodies to help them, sometimes they don't want to go. Sometimes they are saying the government officers and these bank officers, they are very corruptive. They are asking commissions, bribes, and they don't want to go. And there are maybe their own problems also. They don't want to get together, and they want to work like isolation. They don't like competition, and they don't like to group and things like. Then thereafter you can see the problems and constraint for SME development. We develop a framework, what we call the vicious cycle of SMEs. We don't know where to start their problems and the content where it ends. We know it maybe start in finance, marketing, technology, human resources, and training and things like especially the quality problems and operation problem, technology problems, and innovation problems. And then you will see in this lecture notes you have what we call the vicious cycle of SMEs, which we develop, and it is accepted. And we have done a lot of research on that. Sometime maybe if anybody want to do the research on the timber sector SMEs, maybe carpentry or maybe wooden sector, the Moroto Mulla is the ideal locations, surrounding the Moroto University. You find the timber industry is there, city of timber, we located the city, heart of the city of the timber, we go to Moroto Mulla, you will find there. Then sometime as a case study, you can see that, what is the situation of the timber industry, carpentry industry, and the wood industry. Then university also there, then we can help them, but that is not going to happen, always. That is the normal situation with the overall country. In some countries like Vietnam, maybe Thailand, the Korea, maybe Italy, there are some developed, maybe the Japan also, you can see they have a special, in even Pakistan, India also, they are very advanced compared with us, helping and developing SMEs. But Sri Lanka, we have a problem. Sometimes maybe the government officers and the SME apex bodies and even researchers, the institutions, we create the industrial development board, mainly specifically help to the SMEs. Time to time, they do some promotional campaigns. And recently also they had something in the BMICH in annual exhibitions, they are getting SMEs and, even export development board. And, there are plenty of apex bodies, but even though SME is not up to their full potentials, then that may be the good research to find, why the SMEs don't trust the government, so much policies, incentives, tax concession, apex bodies, but even though SME is at the same level from independence up to now, then we have a very good SME database in Sri Lanka. Each 10 years time we do surveys, industry census in Sri Lanka. The latest one available, I think 2013-14, and again it is happening 2023 and 24 database. Each 10 years time data available. Then if you can go to maybe 30-40 years data we have. If anybody want to do research, then you can go to Census and Statistics. They have publications. There you can take their database 10 years time. You can analyze, how they, likewise the case study, the growth of the SMEs in Sri Lanka over the different political regimes, under the UNP government, under the SLFP government, or maybe what we call the coalitions government, how the SME develop in the country. Then that way, it's a very good research topic. There are plenty of research happening. Then we'll start with what we call the imports of the SMEs. Then you can see SMEs are playing very significant role in almost all the economies around the world, in irrespective of the country's development stage. If you go to European countries, the major contributions to the tax income sometimes SMEs, not the largest scales. They always avoid the tax, they don't pay, because the largest scale companies are always belong to the government helpers, and sometimes ministers are their directors and things like, therefore they always evade the tax. Only the small guys are paying the taxes, they are the guys who give a job to the what we call the village level, the girls and boys, Then you can see, however, it is obvious that SMEs functions as a lifeline in informal sector in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe, due to their contributions to the overall economy in many aspects, such as employment generations, export income generations, tax income, and the innovations. And a lot of innovations happening with respect to the SME and the competitiveness. They are becoming more competitive, and the equitable income distributions, because if there's no SMEs, our economies can collapse. SMEs are mainly the one of the main the job creator for the poor people and the social stability, and the domestic resources. They mainly use as much as domestic resources, and regional development happen because of their existence. And ultimately, it is the main source of economic growth in many countries, in Sri Lanka also. If you want to develop a country, you have to first look after the SME sector. And SMEs are commonly recognized as one of the leading group of economic activities globally and cause enormous impact on social issues. In many countries, most companies are currently categorized under the SMEs, and the goods and services the SME offers are very diverse. Moreover, SMEs are suppliers to large enterprises through their, the backward and forward linkages. It is said that SMEs performance, both positive and negative in the Asia Pacific region, may be more influential than any other regions in the world because of the rapid economic growth of the region today, mainly due to the SMEs. And that way you can see, if you get a Sri Lankan data, as I said earlier, Census and Statistic Department each 10 years collecting data. In addition to that, Central Bank also doing some surveys time to time, and there are independent researchers are doing, World Bank is doing, and IMF is doing, and NGOs are doing, then you can see import of the SMEs. We can put a very many indicators, contributions to the employment, GDP, and domestic resource. There are so many things we can put. SME provide the sources for most of the new jobs. SME make up over 90% of the businesses worldwide and account for between the 50 and 60% of the employment. However, their imports in the development process goes beyond their strength in these numbers. The large firms downsize and outsource more functions. The weight of SMEs in the economy is increasing. Then that way you can see there are, by using the various indicators in Sri Lanka also, we can say SMEs are very important for economic growth and the development. Then you can see most of these SMEs around the world are struggling to survive in today's globalized competitive economy. In Sri Lanka, you can see what is the situation in Sri Lanka today. But due to this, what we call the fixing, what we call the floating the dollar pricing, the limited floating of the dollar prices, but the macro indicators are linked to each other. If you want to float the dollar, you have to fix the right interest rate. Without fixing the right interest rate, if you float the dollar, economy can end up with a disaster. Then at least you have to increase the interest rate to maybe another 7-8% up. Then the economy will settle. Otherwise, the good and services prices are rocketing up. Now what happened? Next week you can see situation become worse. Then you can see they are hampered by the lack of technology and access to credit and market, as well as the competition from foreign product. Then you can see, in spite of the various policy reforms, incentives and assistance offered by the successive government in many countries with the assistance of the private sector, NGOs, what we call not for profit firms and donor agencies, still this SME sector is less dynamic and underdeveloped as against the large scale enterprises in the national economy. Then you can see the growth and expansion of SMEs are constrained by problems relating to the both product and the factor market. Lack of institutional support and policy inertia have further reduced the potential contribution of SMEs to the national economy. And that way, imports of the SMEs, then you can see at present Sri Lankan situation, you take in any product sector in Sri Lanka, agriculture or service or industry, or you can see major contribution coming from the SME. Tea sector, you can say rubber sector, coconut sector, manufacturing, garment, apparel, whatever, the transport, sector, maybe the whatever available, other service sectors, trade and the service and the tourism, recreation, construction industry, you find everywhere SME is the main contributor, not the largest scales one. But SME has a problem with the productivity and things like, then the slides are saying the imports of the SMEs for the Sri Lankan economy, it's a very paramount. There's no argument about that. Then thereafter you can see the SME define. How do you define the SMEs? There's no universal single definitions available. It depends, the different ministries have a different definitions. Likewise, earlier I said, especially due to the complexity and the diverse nature of the SME, it is very hard to define SMEs, and currently nationally acceptable single definitions is not available in many countries around the world. In some countries, they have a council, SME council, council, sometimes they define it SMEs. By look at the countries, economic development, inflation rate, and economic growth, and GDP per capita increases, they are defined, they are changing the definitions. But in Sri Lanka, we don't have such a things. Whenever they want to issue some census data or maybe survey data or to give us some incentives or maybe loan help or something, they define it. Otherwise, in many countries, they have policy bodies. Pakistan is a good example. India, Thailand, they have separate policy bodies, separate council, SME councils. They decide it. In Sri Lanka, still very many people are saying us to establish, but nothing happening. Then you can see there are very many definitions available based on the assets, employees, skills, capital, turnover, revenue, local and export market, sophistication, innovation, productivity and growth orientation. Then you can see the most of these organizations use various terms for SMEs such as the SMIs, MEs, REs, and the SMAs and CSSI, ISAs, and MSSA. Sometimes we include even cottage industries, village level cottage industry and the small, medium, everything. Then you can see there are no hard and fast definitions. It depends, Then you can see the most popular definition in Sri Lanka. We have standard institutions have one definitions. They are mainly based on the number of employees. And the Industrial Development Board also capital employed. Then the value of the machineries they were using. Industry and tourism, they are using the capital employed, and that way Federation of Chamber and Commerce, they are also capital employed, and that pays Ministry of Small and Rural Industries total investment. They were the Ceylon National Chamber of Industries, number of employees, there's a value of assets other than building and lands and the number of employees. They are using the two indicators. Export Development Board, capital investment excluding land and building, annual export turnover. Then you can see you get a central bank definition, census and statistics in the World Bank, and you can see number of employees, and mainly they are using the capital employed. So many indicators they are using, but mainly they are using the number of employment they SME created and the capital employed, and maybe the export value and the turnover value, and different indicators they are using. Whenever you want to do research on the SMEs, you can decide your own one, by look at your objectives. And the most popular definitions in Sri Lanka, there are plenty of research available. If anybody want, I can give you regarding that, because in our department also, in our faculty also, highly actively engage in SME research. The most of our lecturers, professors are involved in SME related research, and even most of our MBA students, sometimes half of the batches dealing with some issue selecting from the SME setup, and even a lot of our MPhil and PhD students are also working with SME related issues, especially in MOD department is doing the technology one, the DS department, decision science doing analytics area, and the IM department is doing overall things, marketing, entrepreneurship, or whatever that area. Then you can see the university acceptable official definitions for SME is not available in anywhere, and all the existing definitions depend on the convenience and objectives of a study in the SMEs. But almost all these definitions adopted their main criteria as a number of employees, capital employed, total assets, and the turnover in local and foreign market. But these criteria have its own limitations over time and need changes with technology improvement, productivity increases, and inflation. Still in Sri Lanka, SME database mainly concentrate on the manufacturing, rather agriculture and services activities, because we don't do together all these things. We first do the non-agriculture, thereafter agriculture, thereafter service and trade establishment. And therefore, researchers and authorities should take steps to expand SME database regularly from manufacturing to the agriculture and service sectors, while recommending proper definitions for SMEs. And they can see heavy concentration of SMEs and their supportive organization in Western province in Sri Lanka. Maybe the reasons for urban bias, unequal development in the country. Then you can see most of the SMEs are scattered in the city areas. That is why only Sri Lanka cities are developed. If you go to maybe 40 kilometers away from the cities, you are going to complete different world. No factories, no industries, nothing. Therefore, some policies and studies have to design to promote SMEs in other regions and SME related organizations to provide services for underdeveloped rural areas, as well as most of the time SME apex bodies, the government established the institutions to promote the SMEs are everything located in the Western province. And furthermore, the non-diversification of Sri Lankan industrial structure and its heavy concentration in the few low value-added industry categories is a main problem for sustainability of the industrial development. Especially industries are very unsustainable. This may be a valid point for policymakers to take up and to formulate studies to diversify the Sri Lankan industrial structure to create more value additions to the local economy. And you can see the general assumption is that SME is the main contributor for generation of employment and value added in any economy. But that is very hard to prove through the available Sri Lankan database. For instance, all the available industry census survey data confirm that in terms of number of industrial established people, SME account for over 90%. But in terms of employment and the value added generation, SME contribution around 35% and 20% respectively. Then you can see, but these data mainly manufacturing industry based services, services and primary sector SME data do not explicitly available in Sri Lanka. Then you can see we have a problem with the database. Most of the researchers use the census and statistics department. The 10-year census, they are mainly based on the manufacturing industry. If you see the latest one also, non-agriculture census available. If anybody want, then I can show that one. They have a separate chapter regarding the Sri Lankan SME sector. If anybody interested to raise their dissertation on that area, you can get the data from there. Then you can see the failure of the Sri Lankan SMEs. Generally in Sri Lanka, nearly 80% of new SMEs fail during the first 5 years. Then you can see very high failure rates. Around 15 new companies are registered at the office of the Registrar of Colombo on any working day. 15 new companies. Then you can see that add up to the 4,000 companies per year. Then you can see 80% of them disappear within first 5 years. Then the sole proprietorship companies and the partnership registered at the divisional secretariat level would be around 6,000 per year. Out of this 10,000 business startup, only about 2,000 companies survive for more than 5 years. Then you can see it is common that majority of the SMEs do not last even more than 1 year. They will disappear. Then that may be the good research you to start. Then you can see policies, incentives, concessions, and organizational setup for SME development in the regions with the special emphasis on Sri Lanka. Then you can see the promotion of SMEs specifically came to light in Sri Lanka in mid-1950s with the recommendation of the World Bank mission due to the many problems encountered by the large-scale import substitution industry in Sri Lanka. Then you can see the most of the government came to power in Sri Lanka since mid-50s, promoted the SME according to their political ideology on export-oriented or import substitution basis. Now you can see now we are almost 74 years after political independence. Still SME is not up to their full potentials. SME don't trust the government don't understand SME's language. But some countries, India, Pakistan, and even Bangladesh, Vietnam, Thailand, they may be very active in promoting the SMEs in agriculture sector SMEs, industry sector and even the service sector SMEs. But in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, that is not happening because as SME researchers, we find always this problem. Then you can see the key 4 players can be found in support for SMEs development in Sri Lanka. Government is promoting, private sector is promoting, not-for-profit sector is local, and the foreign NGOs are promoting that one, and multilateral and the bilateral organizations, sometimes maybe Asian Development Bank helping, World Bank is helping, European Union is helping, OPEC is helping, Fed Foundation is helping, everybody is helping, but SME is not up to their full potential. Still SMEs are not developed, Then you can see it's a good research topic, regulatory activities, promotional activities, chambers through, ministries through, there are plenty of programs. Sometimes SMEs, they don't know about all these things, Then we can see how can we get the SME development. Maybe are using the cluster approach, trust approach. There are plenty of the new way of, maybe the Michael Porter's, the what we call the cluster approach, heavily used in, identifying the clusters. Sri Lanka also, we have done 7 clusters. You remember getting the same type of SMEs. In Sri Lanka, you can see the different regions are specialized in different goods and services. Then you get the southern part of the Sri Lanka. Sometimes we can give a maybe fisheries industry to them. And Rajarata maybe some agriculture-based things, maybe upcountry, maybe something else, that way, tea, rubber, coconut-based SME sector, tourism-based SME, gym, jewelry, mining sector. That way, we identify a few of these clusters, and we are promoting, there are plenty of things happening, but even though incubation always happening, business incubators, you find it, the IDB, you have now Bima one, the Malabe, you have a concept nursery, and, the Runa incubator, there are few incubators, but that also, while they are graduating, they are keeping SMEs, they are helping there, once they matured enough, we will say them to leave and start their own business, but that also happening. In universities also, we have a lot of incubations, our undergraduates, we are given the incubations, our idea is to help them as, develop them as a the startup, even a startup, you can say that, it's incubations. And that way, then you can see there are around 50 government statutory bodies, apex bodies, from independence up to now, Coconut Development Authority, Textile Trading and Service, even the Morato University, one of our mandate is to help to the SMEs, the technology problems, but I don't know how far we are doing it, we have now 5-6 faculties, and you have something called the Industrial Development Board, Industrial Technology Institute, Export Development Board, SME banks, and that way you can see there are so many ministries, their duty is to mandate is to help the SMEs. That way, if you read these slides, you can see from 1950s up to now, and through the different political regimes, each 5 years, 6 years time, then we have done a lot of work to promote the SMEs. But even though SME is not up to that one, especially with help of the UNDP and the maybe ADB, World Bank, and and we have got very many new initiatives, but maybe only few years they are working, and these one by one we explain. Even the central bank has and a lot of financial schemes, and private bank has, universities have, even we have degree programs also, small business development and entrepreneurship. Even our MBA in entrepreneurship program also part of the, our idea is to develop a entrepreneurs, they are mainly the startup, mainly the SME guys. And the incubation happening, in how to prepare a business plan, how to produce a product and put into the market, how to fix the right price and things like, we were teaching that one, Sometimes we have special degrees, general degrees regarding that one. But even though still the SME is not up to the mark, So please read these things, then you will get a real understanding what we have done from independence up to now, last 74 years, annual budget, each annual budget, we are giving so many concessions, promotions, incentives to promote the SMEs, but even though it's not picking it up, and in business incubators, in 1980s, we started the work in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka also is still that also started with the JICA initiative, and now we have a few incubators, somehow doing well, like concept nursery in the IT incubator in Malabé, but maybe somehow maybe almost collapse. You can see the Navabima is a very famous business incubator, concept nursery, and that way, and Gemi Pubudu, and there are plenty, lot of things happening, But you can see the main constraint encountered by the SMEs. They have finance related. If you ask from the SMEs, they will say the main problem is the money. No one want to lend them money. They are getting money from the informal sector, very high interest rate. And the marketing related problems, once they produce something, they don't know how to market it. SME marketing is a completely different from the general marketing. Another one, the technology related problems that your area as a technology managers, process technology or product technology, especially these, frontier and emerging technologies, how far that can help to develop SMEs, the growth and the development, that may be ideal topic you to study, even the assignments are related that one, using AI, how can you help, using IoT, how can you help, that way. And the managerial skill related problems, the good managers never ending up with the SMEs, because if you ask from the Morato University engineers, none of them want to work in SME, everybody like to work in a larger scale, that give them, the right career path, and the information related problems, they don't know what to produce, where to put the production, and what is the right color, right shape, and right smelt and things like, information, no one is there to give them a first hand informations. And infrastructure related problems, they don't have electricity, the water problems, telecommunication problems, and especially the waste problems, and and labor related problems, they don't know how to manage the labor, good labor, good people never ending in SMEs, they like to always to go to the other places. And the competitiveness related problems, they don't know how to face the competitions. And the quality related problems, no one there to help them regarding the quality product, the quality circles thing, they don't have any idea, because most of the SME product doesn't have market because they don't know about the quality. And the lack of protection from cheap imports, and sometimes maybe Chinese, Indian imports, completely destroy the whole Sri Lankan SMEs, government administrative and regulatory aspects related problems, the government is too big and, very corruptive, inefficient, it's a mess, and the lack of networking and cooperation among the SMEs, they also don't know how to get together, cooperate and work as a lobbies, especially chambers and, the what we call the industry and the trade chambers, they are also monopolized by the big people, Small people not, they don't welcome. And the no linkage with the large scale import substitution and export oriented industries. We have to link with some countries, like Korea, Thailand, they have that programs. But here you hardly see that. Other problems, there are plenty of problems, main constant encountered by we don't know which one give a preference. Then you can see what is the business cycle of the SMEs: finance, marketing, technology, managerial skill, information, infrastructure, labor, competition related, quality problems, cheap import problems, government administrative, regulatory problems, SME network problems, linkage problems, and so many problems. We don't know how to break this vicious cycle. Is SME can do by themselves, so government has to do, or maybe foreign force can do it, like NGOs or international financial institutions. So that way, because there are plenty of research are moving, some people are giving more analytics, you know, picture for these diagrams, we develop it, now some people are using this one business cycle of this. I mean, we have to break it, one by one we can explain, finance related problem. What are the finance related problem with SMEs? Non-availability of the financial soft terms, because they don't have collateral, no securities to due to the bank, related to the access to equity, bank loans, leasing, venture capital, and other credit instruments. They are not welcome because the heavy risky business, high cost of borrowings, they are always getting informal sector money. And the management of finance, they mix up with the private finance and the company finance, and company will end up, very short period. Then you can see the finance related problems. The same way, other problems like technology related problems, that is your area. Then you can see the product and the process technology issues faced by the SAP design, multi-dimension, and their root causes are very complex. However, few important ones can be categorized as following: lack of modern advanced technology in embodiments formed to increase productivity and the quality, lack of R&D and innovation culture in SMEs, lack of skilled labor to understand the new technologies, slow technology adaptation in mitigations in environmental pollution, lack of technological advancement in raw material manufacturing, no proper mechanisms to commercialize traditional technologies. Maybe sometime, maybe your second assignment help us to do that, then we can, once we identify actually the important traditional technologies already disappeared or existing ones, then we can commercialize it. At the moment, we don't know what are available at the ground level. The other one, the lack of technology transfers and development of local capabilities, non-existence of the mechanisms to develop and commercialize traditional technologies, low level perception of the technology. Technology means only machines, they don't care the other soft part of it. And existence of the technology dualism among the large and small players, is a widening day and night. Unawareness of technology development in other part of the world. If you see the Sri Lankan carpentry industry, you can see it's a 50 years old, the machines they are using, and technology and the designs, and the lack of clear-cut national level technology policies for SMEs, lack of interaction between the industry, universities, and R&D. In a good example, the Moratu University and the timber industry. I don't think so. Any of the projects we are monitoring, we are having regarding the timber industry. Maybe design. We have so many design departments and architecture faculties, and now we have business faculty. We have MBA students, and things like the no stakeholder integration approach in technology transfer aspects, non-availability of cheaper environmental management technology system, and lack of enforcement of existing procedures. Then you can see SME has all sort of technology issues. As a technology management graduates, the future, you can think about, how can we solve the SME's technology issues. Marketing issues, Professor Dinesh will explain to you regarding the SME market is a completely different from the normal marketing. And the industrial linkage programs, we have to link them with the large scale industries as subcontractors or whatever, but there's such a mechanism is not available here. And that way, the legal and regulatory support for SMEs, that also very, controversial area. Then you can see the summarize of that one. There are very many organizations and institutions involved in the development and promotion of SMEs in many countries, but overall coordination is very poor among them. In Sri Lanka, you find, see, all the ministries are promoting SMEs. Very many banks are giving advice, loans, and but overlapping, there's no proper coordinations. And therefore, natural resource wastage and confusion among the SMEs is quite normal. The better coordination should be there between the various stakeholders. The government SME support institutional setup seems like very complex, and system and procedural oriented, should be simplified, and customer driven work should be in the local languages. Then the government can implement regionalization of the with centralization and uniformity with diversity in the SME supportive systems and delivery mechanisms, looking at the special characteristic of the regional SMEs, then you can see everything is still centralized, everything located in the western part of the Sri Lanka. And that way, then you can see this the summarize of that one. And you can see, I don't want to read these things. Then you can see how can we develop SMEs. But from independence up to now, last 74 years, we were promoting it, giving various incentives, paper level and the loan schemes. And then you can see the questions to discuss with you. Explain why SMEs are so important for economic growth and development. And how do you define the SMEs? Explain the main definitions exist for SMEs in Sri Lanka. Do you agree with the statement SMEs are lifeline for formal sector, informal sector in Asia? If there's no SMEs, our economies can collapse. And questions to discuss, you can see. Briefly explain Sri Lanka's recent incentives, concessions, and various promotional measures to develop SMEs. Now we have to develop local SMEs because we have a serious problem with the hard currency. Then whatever available, we have to develop locally. We have to look after our SMEs. Briefly explain the government current SME promotional institutional setups. Briefly explain the main problems and constraints encountered by the SMEs by using a vicious cycle of SMEs. You can easily explain that one. Then what do you understand from vicious cycle of SMEs? What are your suggestions to promote SMEs in Sri Lanka and the region? Write a short essay on the development of Sri Lankan SMEs with a special emphasis on the political regimes. And do you agree with the SME notion that most of the government in developing countries discriminate against SMEs and give all support for large scale modern industries? That was a SMEs feelings, SMEs always say government is not for us, government always help to the big guys, the small guys we are always ignored. Then you can see extra readings, you have plenty of extra reading because we have done a lot of work, a lot of work on the SME in our faculty and our department, especially MOD department. We have very many researchers. We have so many PhD students, MPhil students, even MBA students, they were doing a lot of research on that SMEs. If anybody want the, what we call the SMEs to read, we have, I think, plenty of readings. If anybody want, then I can help them to read these things. For instance, we have a what we call the, you can see this article. Can you see this share? Can you see this share it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is the World Review of Entrepreneurship and Management and Sustainable Development one, and the identification of factors affecting productivity of SMEs enterprises in Sri Lanka, study the case study on the rubber manufacturing sector. Then you can see rubber sector, because actually while I was working in American University of Afghanistan, we developed this one, the one of the Indian professor. Then if anybody want to know what is the problem with the rubber manufacturing sector, you can get all this information because other countries are using this writings, Then you can see this one. Then the Sri Lankan rubber sector SMEs, productivity related problems, In that way, you find we have done a number of studies on that one. And you can see the another one, what we call the, let me share some of these things, then you'll see other one, the development of SMEs through clusters, a comparative study of India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Then that also you can see while I was working to Pakistan Higher Education Commission as a professor, we did some research. Still we are working with some of the projects with the Pakistan government funding. Not like in Sri Lanka, Pakistan is heavily spending money on the SME development. That is why, If you go to the Sialkot type place also, they are only second to the German when it comes to the medical equipment, and the sport goods, all these world-class branded goods, sport goods are manufactured in Pakistan. SMEs, they do it, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. We did a comparative study. Then you can see the Sri Lankan poor situation. This also you can see the development of SMEs through the cluster, Michael Porter's cluster concepts. In Sri Lanka, also clusters we identify, 7 clusters in 1990s. You have all these things are here. If anybody want, then they can read that one. That is available, go to the Indo Science publications. I don't know whether they are freely available. Then you can see these 3 countries, and by using the cluster approach, we are trying to develop SMEs. And that way, you find the plenty of work we have done on SMEs. And you can see another one and this one, while I was working in Pakistan as a professor of the University of Utara, Malaysia. This is Malaysia. While I was working in Malaysia, we developed this one, enhancing competitiveness of small and medium scale enterprises through clusters. Then this also funded, Malaysian government funded the study. Then you can see here also, how can we enhance the competitiveness of SMEs through cluster concepts? Earlier 3 countries, this is only 1 country if I look at that one. And that way you can see in our department is very strong when it comes to the SME research. Therefore, we like to say you people also to the start research on the SMEs. And this you can see the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Small Business Development. Critical success factors affecting the development of clusters for small and medium scale information, IT firms in Sri Lanka, This also, while I was working in Malaysia, we developed this one. And critical success factors affecting this one IT sector, How can we help the IT sector? Anyway, it's picking up compared with other sectors in Sri Lanka. That way, you can see we have done a quite number of, research on especially other one, what we call the incubation. Yeah, this one you can see the business incubation. Everybody's talking about nowadays, Can you share this, sharing?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, then small and medium scale enterprises development in rural areas through business incubators. Then you can, this is actually we publish in the United Nations, the Asia Pacific Tech Monitor, the center. Earlier, it is headed by one of the Sri Lankan person, Dr. Ramachandran Ramanathan, Your technology management lecturers are referring to some of your publications, SME enterprises development in rural areas through business incubators. This may be good, I know some of your MBA students have done quite a lot of work on the business incubations, They were doing, then you can see all the Sri Lankan history of the business incubation and everything is here, If anybody want to do the research on why the incubation may be not going to work in Sri Lanka, Rohana Business Incubator and, all these things are there, Construction Solution Center. And actually, most of the data for these things given by you people, through your assignments and, through your research work. We got some of the data from your writings, Therefore, our faculty and the department is very strong when it comes to what we call the SME research. And in this way, you can see that we have done quite a lot of work with respect to the SME. Even I think we wrote some books also on the SMEs. And you can see some of the books which, yeah, this is on this one, the case studies on small and medium scale enterprise in South Asia with the special emphasis on Sri Lanka. And thereafter, we have done another book on the small and medium scale enterprises in Sri Lanka. that is available in the Nanila publishers, near to the Open University. I don't know, another printing, maybe library has some copies, If anybody want to do their research on the SMEs in Sri Lanka, you have to start with the history, Then this book says all the Sri Lankan SMEs by using mainly the census and statistic, the census data. That way, you can see that there are plenty of research we have done on a SME sector, and not only in Sri Lanka, even the regions, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, even Afghanistan, we have done quite a lot of work. Because I work in American University of Afghanistan also as a professor some time back. And this one also very important, if anybody want to what we call get the data on the SMEs to do their assignments, you go to this one, non-agriculture economic activities in Sri Lanka census. This is the latest available, 10 years time. The next one is coming 2023 and the 24, 10 years time. Then all the data available, if you want to find the, anything on the SMEs, you can see that, especially maybe one chapter I saw that that is regarding the small and this one, Can anybody see this?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, small and medium enterprises in Sri Lanka. This is the latest situation. This is the latest database. There's a freely downloadable, this one from the census and statistic. Then if anybody wants to get a more disaggregated data, you can get a letter from the university and you can get an, you can go there. This may be a nice piece to read, Sri Lankan SMEs, and you can see the, how do you define, different sectors, this may be nice database, this is the latest available. And central bank also time to time doing the, you can district wise, you have, micro, small, medium, and even person engage, location, and all these features available, you can easily get the, district wise, even the grammar say division wise, you can get it, and if anybody want to do the research, then if anybody want more, I can give a more. Yeah, the some of these, I can share some of these papers, if anybody say what are the papers they need it, otherwise you go to the research gate or maybe the Scopus or whatever, maybe like Google Scholars, you will find there, some of these things are you can freely downloadable, some are you have to pay, not for us, for the what we call the to the publishers, because the publishing also more or less, it's a business, Then you can see the other SMEs in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, comparative analysis with focus barriers to growth. That is one of the Indian professor, and me, I was earlier working as a HEC professor to the Pakistan Education Commission. During that time, we started very many things in Pakistan, still the projects are moving. Because Pakistan has a very strong SME sector, But in Sri Lanka, we can create, but our policymakers, politicians, researchers, the institution of expertise, they're not serious about that, I don't know why. Maybe Asian nations, after 74 years later, still only textile sector is picking up, There are some here and there something happening, but it's not up to the full potentials, Then whenever we go to other countries, you will see that, in Sri Lanka also, you don't find the hard researchers also, SME area, In Pakistan, leather sector also, you can see that, very strong leather sector, you find the tanning industry, leather and tanning industry in Pakistan. Still, we are working some of the projects with them. And you can see the technology issues in Pakistan's leather tanning SMEs. This also, I started there, while I was here, we started to publish, leather industry in Pakistan. And whatever we do in Sri Lankan research, actually the Sri Lankan policymakers, they don't even interest about that, But fortunately, we publish internationally, but other countries are heavily using that, You can easily, figure out by look at the citations, which country people, now the technology is there, But in Sri Lanka, hardly none of the researchers, so policymakers, so they don't even touch about what the universities are doing, But other countries, they are using our work. Sometimes they are taken for policy decision making, our research. But in Sri Lanka, they don't interest. In that way, you can see our department, not only me, there are other researchers also, so many people, students are doing their PhDs, in that way. I like to promote you people to start something on the SMEs, if you want to develop this country, you have to start with SMEs, then no issues. Then I guess in today's lecture, I gave us some idea about the consumer and producer behavior and the small and medium scale enterprises in Sri Lanka, their importance, their definitions, the policies, incentives, what is the current situation and the database, especially, that is a very important, then please read the respective chapter in the textbooks. And if anybody want, then I can share a few of these materials with you, in Moodle I can upload. If you are serious about reading it, otherwise no point of bombarding the materials, if you don't have time to read it, especially each and every annual budget, with 10% of the budget dealing with promotion and giving incentives and, put in right directions to the SME sector. Few ministers are there, related with SMEs, but SME sector is not picking up, not up to their full potentials, last 74 years. But you can see the other countries, how the Thailand is doing, if you, most of you have visited the island, you visited the Malaysia, Pakistan, India, you can see the SMEs are very strong, they are backbone of the economy, they develop, they look after it, but here is nothing happening. SME in real trouble, due to this current economic situation. Most of the SMEs are going to go out of the business, especially some are using the foreign raw materials, now they are in trouble. And some are mainly most of the service sector trade establishment, they are importing something and selling, but now due to this problem, the government stopped, put so much taxes and, restriction on, import of these items, then the more problem will come to the, especially service sector and the trade establishment sector, SMEs, and what is the safety net for them, not like other countries, they don't have insurance or social security or nothing, the more violence oriented society will come, people, a lot of crimes and, therefore SME is the only way to settle the social harmony, you have to look after them. Right, I think for today case study, you can submit maybe 2 weeks time as a normal group. Today also we are asking summarize this case study with the 500 words, 5 stage of, let me check that one, 5 stages of the SME's growth. Yeah, this one, the case study on the 5 stages of small business growth. This is a Harvard case, and they develop a framework, by based on the framework, you can learn a lot. Growth, up to growth. You can see there are plenty of diagrams they were put in. Survival stage, success, and success has 2-3 stages, and the takeoff stage, and what are the in the resource maturity stage, then the key management factors, then you will get some idea about the tracing the growth of the SMEs, and they can come up with so many policy prescriptions and especially model. And as a fun, you can read and question, summarize this case, the 500 words, no any other specific questions. If anybody interested, they can go to the census and statistic non-agriculture census, 10 years time, latest 2013-14. And if you want to get data for your other assignment also, not only for this assignment, this module, other module also, even for your dissertation, research project, now itself you can ready for that, identify one sector, and all the data available to do your research and your statistical work. Right, anybody has a questions? Today, I think we have only 37 people, yeah? Maybe I think power cut is not happening now. Right. Anybody has any problem? I think assignments are okay now, now it's up to you to work, everything I gave, but there are plenty of areas to cover. We'll cover very lesser areas, Now we have assignments area, group assignment is there, individual assignment is I already gave. Don't write too much, people don't read, if you write too much. But no more or less a normal assignment structure. But in individual assignments, you can decide whatever you like. It's a very out of box one, free assignment. And if anybody interested to read about the SMEs, then I can give, we have more than 100 articles, research on the SME area, SME technology, marketing, and, even our other faculty members also doing a lot of work on the SMEs. Students are also doing. But even though SME sector is not up to their full potentials, Morato University has a one mandate also to help to solve the SMEs technology issues. But that is not happening. Right. Anybody has any questions? If you don't have any questions, we'll wind up the today's sessions. Right. I think now you are sticking to one textbooks and now you appoint a class representative. And think about, we are giving the case studies and we will discuss the latter part of the lectures, these cases. And anyway, you people are discussing by yourself and finding answers, then I give more freedom you to do that one. And sometime maybe field work, exposure trips, we may be not able to do because due to the pandemic, no one knows, the economic situations. Now, more or less, we are used to this online, delivery. Hope that the student side also, you also have a responsibility. Participate in the classes, reading the respective chapters, doing the assignments, and and listening to the lectures if you want to re-listen it, because we recorded and we uploaded to the Moodle. Right. Then with this one, then we will conclude the today's sessions.